Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Alec Baldwin again in a different incident that's not as staged. That way we can understand some of his personal dynamic right now and further unpack this tragedy that occurred on the shooting of Rust. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. Okay, if you have not seen the first part to this little, apparently two-part series that I was not quite planning on happening, then go ahead and check that out first. It's much more extensive and long than this one is, and I came across and was made aware of and kinda considered some new information after I had posted the last video. I'll talk about that in a second. For now, we're gonna watch this clip of Alec and his significant other reacting to some photographers. Hopefully we can get a dynamic of perhaps what Alec's maybe motive would be in this sort of situation, and then we'll talk about it at the end and how everything plays out, and some other details that I didn't quite cover in the past video.
Let's go.
I will.
What do you want to know?
All right, Alec, what's the current state of what's going on with the case?
I'm not allowed to make any comments because it's an ongoing investigation.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and note just their general nonverbal communication. Both of them have their hand in their pocket, they're both standing back, and they're not standing close to each other, and they both have their phones out right here. Now, maybe somebody could try to say that this is a blocking gesture. I don't think it is. I think that's just the most comfortable place to hold your phone comfortably, and they're obviously recording this on some level, so that's what we can note so far. But what I will note about their dynamic right now between Alec and his wife is that they are not showing any affection towards each other. They're not standing close to each other. It doesn't seem as though they're drawing strength from each other during this very trying time. It seems as though they might be two individuals at this point. Just a fascinating thing to note between their dynamic, and we'll talk more about why that might be in a little bit as this develops.
Ordered by the Sheriff's Department in Santa Fe. I can't answer any questions about the investigation. I can't. It's an active investigation in terms of a woman died. She was my friend. She was my friend.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and well, think about what Alec has just said here about him saying that she was his friend. We covered in the previous video, not really true. He was co-workers with her, but as far as friendships goes, not likely. Now, I find it interesting that he does reiterate this again and again. She was my friend. She was my friend. This reiteration, once again, is trying to drive home this side of him that we kind of unearthed to not be true. And along with that, though, I will say that he is being synchronized while he's saying he can't speak about it. Everything that he's saying is flowing across his body. It seems to be fairly synchronized, so I doubt that he can really say anything about it, and I mean, that's fairly common sense as well. Although I will say that I think this interview that he had done that we already covered may be one of the worst things he could have done for himself ever. More in a second.
The day I arrived in Santa Fe to start shooting, I took her to dinner with Joel, the director. We were a very, you know.
Okay, this is interesting. A few things just happened here of note. So he's still trying to hammer home this idea that he was real tight with the victim, and that's simply not true, as we have said, but he's still trying to hammer it home by saying, yeah, we went to dinner, and obviously the only two people that can ever go out to dinner, especially if there's more people involved, are close friends. That's just social rules, is that if you go to dinner with somebody, you are immediately their best friend. Apparently. I mean, at least that's what I'm gathering from Alec in this. And then along with that, it looks like his wife comes up and tries to say something to him, and he dismisses her very nonchalantly. And, well, for lack of a better term, dismissively, with the, "Excuse me, I am talking. How dare you interrupt?" side of things. That's the feeling that we're able to get from him, especially backed up by his nonverbal communication in this area, with not making eye contact to her, stepping away from her, putting his hand out, and even verbally saying, "Excuse me," while doing that. That just lets us know that he doesn't want to be around his wife. He's having issues in that relationship, even down to this level of wanting to really back up and make space between her and him in this area. That's, I would think, fairly important to note, that Alec's relationship might be a little bit on the rocks. We'll talk a bit about that in a bit.
Well-oiled crew shooting a film together, and then this horrible event happened. Now, I've been told multiple times, don't make any comments about...
So he had a bunch of stuttering leading up to describing his crew as a well-oiled crew. And there has been a lot centered around this line. Why would he say that? And he even reiterated, this is falling in line with the interview as well, of saying things like, I have no idea how everything was going, and then switching around and saying, no, I know that it was a well-oiled crew. He has these difficulties in his story, these areas where it disagrees, and the more you think about it, the more clear and clear and clear that this becomes that Alec's not as innocent as he's trying to portray here, and I'll explain why I personally feel that way, and quite a few people who also approached me feel that way as well in just a moment. Let's continue watching this here.
The ongoing investigation, and I can't. That's it.
And you met
What
with,
are the...
Sorry.
What are the questions that you have other than that?
You met with I'm afraid I forget her name in the moment, but you met with her family in the day.
Yes,
her
I
name
met
is
with her
Helena. If you're spending this much time waiting for us, you should
don't know
her
her
name.
name.
Her name is Helena.
Helena Hutchins. I met with her husband Matthew and her son. Yeah, that's right.
Now you notice here that she is far more aggressive than he is in this situation, and this is odd in that this was directed more towards Alec and involves Alec, and she's getting involved in this very aggressive way. It makes me ask questions, just why is that such a sensitive topic there? Not sure, but it is something to make note of. That is an odd character behavior from her in this instance. Let's continue watching.
And how did that meeting go?
I wouldn't know how to characterize it. They're mortified.
You guys, you know what? No details.
But do me a favor. I'm gonna answer the question.
Well, I appreciate that he was probably very upset.
The guy is overwhelmed with grief. This is...
Okay, so he does another dismissal of his wife here with the, I'm going to answer the questions. He does a placating gesture, and he once again is not looking at her. He's not making eye contact with her. There is still no chemistry between the two of them, and that is still just letting me know how their dynamic is going. Now, whether or not their dynamic was going poorly like this before the incident, or if it's just after, I'm not sure. I don't have evidence for that. I would suspect that it was happening before and was rather inflamed by the incident. And yeah, we'll talk more about that in a second.
Something that there are incidental accidents on film sets from time to time, but nothing like this. This is a 1 in a trillion episode. It's a 1 in a trillion event. And so he is in shock. He has a 9-year-old son. We are in constant contact with him because we're very worried about his family and his kid. And as I said, we're eagerly awaiting for the Sheriff's Department to tell us what their investigation has yielded. What else do you have?
Would you ever work on another film set that involves firearms of that nature?
I couldn't answer that question. I really don't have any. I have no sense of that at all. I do know.
Okay, so noting all of this behavior while he's speaking about this, one thing that is adding an extra dynamic is obviously that they're outside, so factors like wind perhaps causing itches, the vehicles driving by causing them to move irregularly, look irregularly, so this has caused now a whole bunch of action as more cars are going by. That's going to make the nonverbal read a little bit more muddy. And then as far as the verbal patterning that he's using here, there's nothing of note to go off of. He seems to be more factually just stating aspects of things rather than anything that might be incriminating, so there's not too much to even hone in on here. But along with that, if you hear what he said here in regards to will he ever work on another film with firearms in it, and he has an interesting pattern that we saw pop up in his interview as well of this very, very quick stumbling stutter around this agitation point. Very curious. The other times that we've seen it, we know that it is in context, showing that he doesn't have any certainty on that matter, and he even shows that further with his words saying, I really don't know, which is interesting because he said in his interview that he really couldn't see himself ever working on a film ever again with firearms ever again. And that's interesting because that goes pretty against what he's saying here where he's like, oh, I just have no idea, and he's being genuine about it. He doesn't know, which means that before he had, at very least, emotionally reacted to the question and promised a never when it certainly shouldn't have been. A little lie, a small lie, not that important of a lie, but still a lie, meaning he's willing to at least twist some truth. Let's keep watching.
That an ongoing effort to limit the use of firearms on film sets is something I'm extremely interested in. Yeah, where are you? But remember, something that I think is important, and that is, how many bullets have been fired in films and TV shows in the last 75 years? This is America.
Millions.
How many bullets have gone off in movies?
Okay, so now he's doing his classic things again where he's just shifting blame. First, he has his stutter and his stammer, which we just know means that he's on hot coals more or less at that point and backpedaling. He's insecure, he's insincere. We shouldn't trust more or less anything that he's saying while he's spouting the stuttering. Along with that, right afterwards, he then starts to use the math excuse as well of being like, remember how many bullets are being fired. There's so many bullets being fired that this is just a freak accident, and that could be true. Another way to look at that, Alec, would be that there are so many safe bullets fired, and this happens very, very, very rarely. And especially in this instance, it doesn't seem to be a malfunction. It seems to be something different. We'll talk more about that in a second and why I feel that and some of the processing behind that in a moment. Let's gather some more information.
And nearly all of it without incident. So what has to happen now is we have to realize that when it does go wrong, and it's this horrible catastrophic thing, some new measures have to take place. Rubber guns, plastic guns, no real armaments on set. That's not for me to decide. It's urgent. It's urgent that you understand I'm not an expert in this field. So whatever.
This kind of goes against what he was saying earlier, where he's like, no, I've got guns at my fingertips. I know how to use guns. I'm a master at it. I'm an old school actor. That's what we do is with our horseback riding, motorcycles, French, and gunslinging. It's just part of our expertise, is what he was saying earlier. So obviously he's not an expert now, which is just fascinating. But what I will also make note of is the odd parallel between Alec Baldwin's response of being so proactive to rush by a death to find a solution for said death that was probably caused by him, that we happen to see in Travis Scott earlier, being so pro-solution that they wanted to rush right by the deaths that had been possibly caused by them. Very, very similar parallels here, very interesting. There's more thoughts coming, let's continue.
Whatever other people decide is the best way to go in terms of protecting people's safety on film sets, I'm all in favor of, and I will cooperate with that in any way that I can.
Do you have any further projects in the works?
What if their suggestion was to check your weapon before pointing it at somebody and possibly in any way allowing it to go off? Alec, what if you were supposed to safety check your weapon first? What if another suggestion, a safety suggestion, was don't point your weapon at somebody, even if they're suggesting it, unless it is cleared and done with safety? I don't know, just some other thoughts that I think even some other producers and people involved in the film industry thought as well, Alec. Just thinking, but I'm glad that you are totally willing to go along with everything. Let's continue watching this and then we'll talk.
Moment, or is everything on hold?
No, that's irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Do you think production will start up again on that?
No, that's irrelevant to what we're talking about, and a little flash of disgust comes in here. It's hard to say whether or not this was a genuine flash. It was very fast, so it could be considered a micro-expression, which would mean that he would be feeling on some level disgust in regards to that question. Now, whether or not it's somebody asking the question that's causing the disgust or the question itself that's causing the disgust, can't really say, but we do know that disgust was at least felt on some level there in regards to that. Something to think about, definitely just to keep in mind, not too revealing here, but needs to be made note of.
I doubt it necessarily. Was there anything else?
Why Vermont, Alex?
Because
that's
we
a
just
no,
do-
that's
it's
a
private.
person. That's private. Yeah, that's private. Anything else?
Okay.
So just do me a favor, if you don't mind. My kids are in the car crying.
Because you guys are following
And
them
all I
and
want
they
to do,
know.
as a courtesy to you, I came to talk to you. I'm not allowed to comment on the investigation. I talk to the cops every day. I talk to them every day to find out.
They know where you are.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm cooperating with them, of course. So my point is that I'm just asking. We sat down as a courtesy now to talk to you. Now, please, would you just not follow us for the rest of the
Okay, so this is interesting when they bring up that they know where you are. He does his stammer, his stutter. This caught him off guard, and that was an interesting question, like a fairly telling question that he did dodge fairly well, because if he had responded, oh yeah, they know exactly where I am at all times, then it would be like, well, why do they know that, Alec? Why do they know exactly where you are? And he does say, well, yeah, I'm working with them in any way that I can, or something along those lines. So it's very interesting that that does pop up. Let's go ahead and play out the rest of this, and then we'll chit-chat about everything and some of the other details that, like I said, some of you have brought up to me. Let's go.
Just leave us
Just
alone.
go home.
We gave
Go
you everything
home.
we could
Thank
possibly
you.
give you, okay?
Thank you.
Go home.
Condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec.
Now turn it off.
Okay, so she was obviously much more hostile than he was in this situation and carried on throughout the rest of that. And I'm not doing a nonverbal read on her, I'm doing a read on Alec in this situation and gathering some context. So we know that at very least their relationship is strained. We're also not surprised by this. So this is why I decided to make this video, because after recording the previous one, I was called by my dad, who is an old Western guy. He used to be in rodeos and understands especially the old weaponry in Western films, things like that. So he was calling in regards to that, and he brought up a point to me that day that I thought was fantastic and important to note in regards to Alec's recollection of what occurred. And then after he had called me, I went ahead and kept checking in with comments on the videos, and more people have noted this, and I feel like it's important enough to note because it kind of pokes a really big hole in Alec's story. Well, first, many experts have said that the gun couldn't have accidentally gone off the way that he described, which I would trust the many experts who have said that unless it was tampered with, which is a possibility. That is a very distinct possibility. And it would be a realistic possibility if it weren't for how Alec described the incident. So if you remember, he described the incident as far as pulling the hammer back, and then when he released it, a shot rang out and everybody was surprised and confused and blah, blah, blah. Well, first, the ability for you to cock that hammer back and just release it like that, it doesn't exist. It does require trigger interaction to be able to make the gun do that move specifically. So that likely wasn't the case, but perhaps he could have managed that on some small level. Then there is this issue, is that according to him, he was holding the gun rather gently. It's a marking rehearsal. He's not prepared to shoot. He wasn't planning on shooting. His finger wasn't on the trigger. And so he would be holding a gun as if it were just that, an empty weapon that's not going to do anything, which means you're not gripping it and you're not preparing for a shot. So when you release that trigger, then there would be a loud bang, right? That hammer, according to Alec. The question is, if that loud bang was a blank, then what happened to the people who are dead? That would be important. Well, we know it's not a blank. There was a live round. And then our question is, well, then what happened to the force of the gun, to Alec? And how did it take him 45 minutes to an hour to consider that it was a gun that had gone off? Because he releases a hammer that fires a live round. And for reference, this is footage. I've been playing footage here of what it looks like to fire live rounds from this weapon. You can see the kick. It's noticeable. Even if you're loosely holding it, you could still maybe hold on to it, but you'll know that that gun was fired. It kicks. So for Alec to be like, yeah, I shot, or I heard a gunshot, I had no idea what happened. I was still obviously holding my gun that had apparently not moved, which is not possible. And the person in front of me falls, a man screams in the background, and it doesn't dawn on him for 45 minutes to an hour. It simply cannot factually be true. Either Alec was preparing for that gunshot so that that gun wouldn't jolt out of his hands or he would notice it, or he's lying. And something else happened at that time. So either one, Alec, you're hiding something from everybody about what happened at that shoot, because I refuse to believe that it took you 45 minutes to figure out that a live round had left that gun. So either you're lying to everyone and something else happened and our answers should be met. Somebody is dead for this and you're lying about it, or you killed her. Those are our two options right now. This doesn't have to do with body language. This doesn't have to do with anything. That's just your only two options. With the story you told. Not our story, not a made-up one. Alec, you said that it took you 45 minutes to an hour to realize that a gun that had been in your hands that shot a live round that would have had kick to that live round, it took you 45 minutes to an hour to realize that it may have been a gunshot, and then also along with that, do you expect us to believe that a round tore through somebody and you thought maybe they had passed out. You stood over them for a minute and there was no blood. There was nothing. You just stood over them while they were maybe passed out and nothing happened, being shot point blank. But now I want to be able to make this clear. From this point on, I have no evidence. There's nothing for me to walk on, to stand on, for me to say this, aside from some loose assumptions. So be very understanding of that moving from this point on. It's just me asking questions about a situation that I think need to be addressed and perhaps finding direction as to what a cause could be. So Alec has a history of indecent behavior towards a various number of people. And this is all surmising. There's no evidence. I haven't seen any rumors of this, but I do find it interesting that perhaps their relationship, Alec's relationship, is not going as hot as he says it is, as evidenced by the video that we watched today. Now, this is all based off of a what if, so this is only a question that should be investigated, not taken as truth or as fact. But relationship being on the rocks is not a good situation to be in. There was an odd, hostile reaction centered around Hutchins from the wife, and I don't have evidence for this. I keep saying that because I want to make this very clear that this is just an opinion. There's not a reason behind this that can be backed up, but I would say that it would not be surprising if a lawsuit could be involved, and money, and relationship issues, and inappropriate behavior. I don't know that that's the case, but it would satisfy all the needs for a motive to have a lawsuit covered in the latter half of a dying acting career with marriage on the rocks. I'm not sure. That perhaps could be the story of Alec Baldwin. Many things to think about. So that's my thoughts on this. Please feel free to just let me know in the comments below if there's something that I'm missing. How could Alec have missed the kick? How could he have? What part of the recoil would have been easy for him to miss? Now, a far out there idea is, what if somebody else shot and the bullet came from somebody else and it was really a secret one, and then it's so complex and out there, literally the only two options is that Alec is either a bold-faced liar or he's sinister and evil. I don't know another way to look at it. Please let me know in the comments below if there's something different that I am not considering. I am very open to it because right now this seems very black and white where it shouldn't be, and I really, really hope I'm wrong. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video, but without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.